Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back to TFR for another edition of Investor Stories. On this segment, the experts talk about a startup that failed and the causes of that failure. Here's the segment called Post-Mortems. On today's special segment, we have Mike Smerklo of Next Coast Ventures. Mike, tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed.
Yeah, we had one, and I think this gets back to the market size. So that's the punchline. This amazing company in Austin, it was trying to take butcher. So you go to the butcher and you get meat delivered to the home. So it's trying to do that last mile. It's not the one we passed on earlier, but we gave a little bit of seed money to this company. Great founder, really knew the space, had all the stats on how, meat from a butcher, if you're a meat eater, spends all this wasted cycle to get to Albertsons or H-E-B, and then you buy it and there's all this markup. So his whole view was we can disrupt that and we can go direct to consumer. So it was an early direct to consumer play. And it was phenomenal, Nick. If you lived in Texas, he would deliver to my house like amazing short ribs, and they were so fresh, and everybody loved it, and you're willing to pay the premium. Really, really interesting play. The reason it failed was to that sustainability of the value proposition. And it really taught me a lot around not just market size, but back to that, what does the consumer experience is? Turns out the problem with this is, I tend to go, or my wife and I go, when we go to the store, we buy a bunch of other stuff and then we go to the butcher. So it just had a very niche nature to it. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things you hated to see. And we ended up folding it up and the founder went on to do something else. But we hated, you're like, this is an amazing solution. The customer feedback, if you did a net promoter score, it would have been, if 100 was the highest score, it would have been 101. People loved it.
Wow.
But you just go, okay, is it really something that I'm going to change my behavior on? And that's why I obsess now about, when we talk about the trends, like, do you change your behavior? Like, think how Slack changes your behavior. Mm-hmm. And I think if you really want to build a big company, you have to have a solution that's so robust and so interesting that consumers are willing to change your behavior. In this case, it wasn't that strong enough.
On today's special segment, we have Spencer Maughan of Finisteer. Spencer, can you tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed?
For sure. So I'll go back in time on this one. So, the clearest one was a plant science company that we'd funded. So it was interesting. They were using a whole bunch of different metabolic sort of genes to change nitrogen uptake and nitrogen utilization. And nitrogen ultimately is, one of the key bounds for productivity, for yield. So they were yielding more of these plants essentially. And it was during a period where it was difficult to sit down with the entire team. And so it's, a good syndicate came around it and we're really excited about what we had seen. So we invested in it. It turned out that two of the experiments it was based on, the technology was sort of flawed. And so as much as we ran at it and had some great scientists in the company working to bring sort of the science to a technology platform, so to speak, it just, was failing. And so it was pretty painful because it was ultimately on us that we really hadn't done enough work around verifying the field trialing and then some of the constructs and things like that on a genetic basis. And so, that was really it was set for failure from the beginning, and we really should have looked into that. But yeah, that was a painful one. They're always so painful, right? The failures, you remember them very distinctly.
On today's special segment, we have Vanessa Larco of NEA. Vanessa, can you tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed?
A portfolio company that's failed. I don't have one yet, which is scary. And for like, it's not because I'm a brilliant investor. I think it's just we're in this crazy market where everything's getting funded. No matter if you have a pulse, you're getting funded. So none of my companies have failed yet. And I don't know if that's healthy or not, to be honest.
Interesting. On today's special segment, we have Ben Weiner of JumpSpeed. Ben, tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed.
Yeah, I mean, portfolio companies fail, and it's sad. I'd want to try to stay positive and not blame anybody else. I'll take one on my shoulders, like the stuff that failed because of me. And there was in Fund Zero, in my first fund in 2014, one of the activities that I did, which for obvious reasons I've stopped, is what people call venture building. So I was really running like a hybrid, like meeting with founders and investing in their startups, and also cooking up my own ideas, because there were some fascinating young, entrepreneurs in the ecosystem here in Jerusalem that were not attached to companies. And I had some ideas for startups, and I had a background as an entrepreneur. And I was like, okay, I'll give you the idea. You guys sit around the table. I'll fund you, and let's go. And basically one after the other, all of those failed. And I had modeled it after BetaWorks in New York and Pioneer Square Labs in Seattle. And I was reading what they were doing, and they're like, oh yeah, I could do that in Jerusalem. And turned out that I couldn't, just for whatever reason, either my ideas were terrible or something was wrong structurally. But I pretty quickly shuttered that because I was doing really great on the arm's length investments and picking really well. And those companies were shooting forward and raising additional capital. And my venture building ones were one by one dying, without raising additional capital. So by the current fund, what I call Fund One, I stopped doing that. I told my LPs, okay, I learned my lessons. I'm not doing that anymore.
I think we're all so tempted to do that as VCs. We've got a stable
Don't do it.
We've got a stable of ideas that we wish we could find, founders doing. And I look at, the models, the venture studio models that are working, and it's interesting. But I always go back to, I read something from Sam Altman, or maybe it was a podcast, where he was talking about at YC at one time, there were these amazing teams that just didn't have an idea. And what they began as an experiment is, let's connect these incredible teams with these really big ideas that, the folks at YC had that, they wanted to see addressed. And you fast forward, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And I think Sam said none of those companies worked out. They all went to zero.
Some people are able to do it. Like BetaWorks is amazing, and Pioneer Square Labs is amazing. And there are a bunch of other examples of people that do it really, really well. And after a while, I realized I'm not those people. And, you got to do what you're good at. And I have Breezometer and Auto Lead Star and MDGo and Genetica Plus and on my investment side that are awesome. Let me just continue to find those, and that'll be good enough for me.
That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.